And we are live. Welcome. My name is Isaac. I am the co founder and the host of the Pet Care Report. The mission of the show is to connect pet parents with the world's leading pet experts and brands to discover the latest trends, innovations, and essential products for optimal pet care. Today's live episode 17 of the Pet Care Report. We're super excited to have a very special guest, co-founder of the Real Dog Box, Ruby Balaram. Ruby is the COO and founder of Real Dog Box, a monthly dog treat and chew service. She oversees the operation at their kitchen in San Diego, as well as the customer service and designs and implements the policies to promote company culture and the vision. Her passion is to help people feed their dogs real food and provide educational courses for dog parents and veterinary professionals. Today, we're going to discuss what are the 3 key steps to feeding your real dog food, what you need to look for when buying in-store treats, and the simple steps that you can use to make your very own treats at home. Welcome. Thank you so much, Ruby. It's an absolute pleasure to have you speak in your time today. And I know you're super busy, so our audience is definitely going to love a lot of this information, especially to learn what when you're looking to buy these treats, what you need to look out for, because so many people don't know that, and then also how to make it yourself. So, welcome, Ruby.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be your guest number 17.
So one of the things that I like to ask people, and it's like, what is it about? And it's not so much about real food, but about pets in general. Is what is it about animals that you love that got you into which is essentially drove the passion to create Real Dog Box?
Well, I have the unfortunate story of having a sick dog who had gotten cancer, which unfortunately is how a lot of people in our specific industry tend to start, because we're faced with a challenging situation where, our dog's sick, we don't know what to do, and we're just ready to try everything. And that's really what started my journey into dog food. I was actually a paralegal for many, many years before I quit, moved 3,000 miles west to start Real Dog. And our dog had gotten cancer, and we just were told he was going to have only 6 months left to live. And, whether you're a new dog owner or one that's probably had one for a long time, receiving news like that it's devastating and almost unacceptable. Like you don't want to accept those circumstances, which was the case for us. And when we started doing a deep dive into why that cancer came about, not one, but 2 times, and other, health issues we were dealing with, it came down to food, the most important biological need that we all have: food, water, shelter. And when we looked into what could have caused this issue, it was food. When we looked into what could fix it, it was food.
Yeah.
And so we took a deep dive down the road of raw feeding and learned that, this is the right way to go. This is what our dogs and our cats need to be eating, something that's biologically appropriate for them and not highly processed. And it kind of was common sense. Like, we know that for ourselves, we shouldn't really be eating processed foods in abundance, everything in moderation, but really we should try to eat fresh foods. We feel better, we look better when we do that. And so we switched our dog to a raw diet about 6 weeks after his diagnosis and prognosis, rather. And he ended up just turning into this brand new dog. He could barely walk, and he was chasing me around the house. I was holding a little chicken quarter, and it was new found love for life and food. And so you hear a lot of those anecdotes, people saying, I changed my dog's food and they were a new dog, but there wasn't a whole lot of science behind that. And that's why we wanted to get into this to this area, this industry, because we knew, number one, we could make a difference with real food. And number two, we wanted to get to the bottom of why this is the best food for our dogs to be feeding.
Yeah, and I guess for my own curiosity, and I kind of felt I've gotten a little bit lucky where since I've been into this industry, I just kind of fell into feeding raw based on, I think Katie Woodley was one of the first people that we'd worked with. And, what was it about raw, the difference between cooked? Because you're still doing it yourself and, it's still good. You're buying your own groceries. What was it that made you think about raw rather than cooked?
Well, we're the only living mammal on the planet that actually cooks their food, right?
Yeah.
For centuries, thousands of years. Other animals haven't had the need to do that. And that's simply because biologically, they're equipped to handle food in its raw state. Not just equipped, but that's the most bioavailable state of the food. They can absorb and utilize the most nutrients in its raw form. Cooking, really, we only started doing that when we understood the agricultural revolution started, and there were different crops that by their nature had to be cooked. And then, we learned about pathogenic bacteria and how some animals may carry things that don't quite literally sit well with us. Yeah. And so how do we rid of those pathogens? We've got to cook them to a certain temperature. But our dogs, on the other hand, don't have that need. So even coming from like a convenience standpoint, for some people, their language of love is cooking for their loved ones, cooking for their dogs. But it kind of takes that step out of it. You don't have to cook it. You can just kind of, put it all together and feed it.
Yeah, my little dog, my little Frenchie, he loves his raw food. He's such a little piggy. I have to be very. We recently took him to the vet, and he's been with my mum since I'm living in Bali, and he's getting a little bit porky because my mum spoils him too much, and I'm like, Mum, you gotta cut that out because he would just keep eating. But yeah, he's been so lucky, his diet's just been, and it's just been fortunate, like people like yourself and many other experts that we work with. I've been fortunately enough to get people on the right pathway. So I guess one thing that we want to know is what are the 3 key steps that you recommend when it comes to feeding your dog real food?
Well, I put these 3 steps together because, believe it or not, as much as you and I are inundated in this particular industry with so many raw feeders, there's also a very, very large population of dog owners and cat owners that are not feeding fresh food, and they are quite intimidated by it. And understandably so, because I think the industry has sort of brainwashed a lot of us into thinking that we are not smart enough to feed our own pets at home. We're not smart enough to put our meals together for our dogs and our cats. And so we rely heavily on somebody else to make that food for us, whether that be a processed food, a kibble, a cooked food, or a raw food. But the truth is, now there are so many resources out there. We can actually learn how to do that, how to do it right, correctly and confidently. And it starts with one really, really big step, which is understanding your dog's poop. You've got to become a poop inspector. You weren't expecting that one, were you?
It makes sense, but no, I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah, I know. And I don't know why we've made it so incredibly uncomfortable to talk about poop, but especially if you are co-parenting a dog, if you're not asking your partner what their poop look like, are you really a dog owner? So I want to sort of go over and make poop a little bit more comfortable to talk about, because I really truly think that once you have a firm understanding of what healthy dog poop is, you'll feel far more comfortable adding different things into your dog's meals. When we look at our animals, it's very difficult to tell how they're feeling. They can't physically tell us, but they can show us. We can see that. We can observe that and deduce what their health state is through their stools. And you should really know how to check the common things. It starts on the top of the head. You check their eyes, you check their ears, you check their nose, you check their paws, and you should be checking their poop too. So I thought I would sort of give you the breakdown of what normal dog poop should look like, and maybe run through the rainbow of colors you might see when you start adding fresh food into your dog's diet. So normal poop should be a firm consistency, small, compact, easy to pick up, and doesn't smear when you pick it up. It doesn't leave behind any kind of smudges. That's a sign that your dog is appropriately eating and using all of the food that you're feeding, and there isn't consistently a sort of digestive upset. You feed your Frenchie Rob, which is like, when you said that, I was like, interesting choice of breed, Isaac. Curious how that came about.
But my stepfather realized why I did buy it when I was walking down, and how often he was getting stopped, and it's like, I see what he's done.
Oh, okay. I get it.
He's like, smart.
Okay, so hopefully, you're feeding a raw diet right now, so hopefully those poops look small, compact, and easy to pick up. A big sort of stinky pile of soft serve is not normal. And, we do one-on-one coaching and consultations with our members. And that's one of the biggest differences we see when people switch from a kibble to raw food. So I'm just, for the sake of this, I'm going to assume that most people watching are probably kibble feeders who are interested in boosting their dog's bowl by adding in fresh food. So those big stinky poops, not normal, and they will change once you start feeding something that's biologically appropriate. But whenever you're looking at it, you want to look at the shape, the color, the consistency, the quantity, and the content. And so if you can imagine, I need to have a prop for poop next time. Kind of looks like a meatball. Pretty small and relative to the size of your dog. Brown color is normal, but let's go through the rainbow of poop just to sort of make things easier. Because when something's different in your dog's poop, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's something wrong. But just like us, when we eat different foods, sometimes comes out differently or doesn't sit well, or it does. But we should just be aware of these changes. So we start with a nice brownish color. Orange poops usually are a result of our dogs eating poultry. So chicken or even duck might have a yellow orangish poop. Red poops are usually a sign of red meat, or beets if you're feeding, red colored vegetables. In the orange colored case, like peppers or something like that, squash, red orange.
Carrots?
Yeah, carrots, exactly. Yeah. Green colored poop, usually leave those dark leafy greens, or if your dog's eating grass, they might turn green. Black poop is often a sign of red meat, or sometimes too much organ. And so if you are starting off adding fresh food into your meal, you put too much organ and your dog's poop are kind of black or very dark, that just means you need to cut back a little bit on that. And then white poop is typically a sign that there's too much bone or too much calcium. Again, that doesn't mean that there's something wrong, but there was too much calcium, your dog couldn't consume it, and so it passed through the stools. And so I think just being comfortable with these different colors and shapes and sizes, and knowing, my dog's poop is orange, but I didn't feed any carrots or squash or chicken. So that might be an indication that there's something wrong and something to look into.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I guess unless they've been sneaky little rat bags and they've found something, which they often do. But yeah, just like the body's telling you what's actually going on, and being mindful. I was doing that a little bit subconsciously. I would notice that, like, if he was a bit constipated, then I'd make sure that he's getting more fiber, and then I'd be like really proud, and I'm like, but not actually telling anyone that I'm like stalking his poop, and I'm like, oh, it's like okay.
You would be surprised how many poop photos I have on my phone. Not just my dogs. I mean, people send them to me.
Yeah.
And I think it's starting to become a little bit more mainstream. And so every time I do a live, I'm like, let's talk about poop. Let's just make it comfortable.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's important too, and I guess if you're going to see your vet, you can. It's a really good. It can really help them try and help the owner figure out where there possibly could be what possible health issues could be going on. So yeah, no, I think it's really important. I guess the other thing that is when it comes to treats, because I know you guys do an amazing treat box, and for people that haven't used your service or just looking, what are the things that they should be looking for when buying treats? And I think this is really important because I made the mistake the one time I was at the dog store and they gave a free treat to my dog, and I'm like, yeah, I'll give it to him. And then he had diarrhea for the next day, and I'm like, oh. And I was like trying to think, like, what is it that he's had? And like, he's had really good food, and like, oh, that damn treat.
Yeah,
it was the one thing, and it set him off. Yeah, so like what should people be looking for when they're buying treats for their dogs?
Well, the best thing to start with is something that's single ingredient. So I want to take a step back real quick before we get to that, because once you know what your dog's poop looks like, you know that whatever you add in might make it look different. So the first thing that you can do is start adding things directly from your fridge, fresh food that you're eating. So I like to add in eggs, bone broth. I often have bone broth in my refrigerator.
Is that powdered or in the soup?
I usually have it made. I like to make my own bone broth, but nowadays I tend to see it commercially available. I like to make my own because you don't want the bone broth that's made with like garlic and onions and all of those other. They often add a lot of salt.
Yeah, okay.
You know, and so like all of these things I'm mentioning are the things that that's what you want to avoid. You don't want to feed those, but keep an eye out for them because commercially a lot of those things will be added.
Yeah.
And then lastly, some sort of lean meat. If you're not a vegetarian, then hopefully you're not eating out all the time. And if you got some fresh lean meat in your refrigerator, start by feeding a small amount of that. Because, before any seasonings are added into it, that's the easiest way to sort of start getting variety into your dog's bowl. And when there are changes in their poop, you know what to look for and when to freak out and when not to freak out. And so I wanted to take a step back and look at that, because if you sort of have the mindset of, I would like to feed only things that I would eat myself. And perhaps not all of us are huge fans of organ meats, but they're making a comeback. Have you seen like the ancestral diet and the ancestral supplements?
Yeah, I gave some organs. I bought some organs for my mom, and she's like, "Oh, do I have to touch that?" Like, just put it in a little bowl. He'll be fine. You don't have to touch it.
Exactly. But the organ meats are going to be your most nutrient-rich foods to feed. So I start with those. Those are things that I would even feed, if you can get a hold of it from your local butcher or market. Those are things you can feed raw, as well as the lean meats. And so now...
Don't some butchers, well, in Australia, I don't know about the US, but in Australia, there are some butchers where you can go and ask for, like, if you ask for pet mince, they have a combination rather than just one organ. They actually have a combination of all the organs together. Sure. Do they have that in the US?
Yeah, they usually call them giblets, and like for the whole animals, they'll take those out. Yeah, they have those available. They're, like I said, they're making a comeback. California usually is the first to like take a step towards. I've seen some people eating raw liver. Some of my neighbors are really into that. But that said, it's because they're so incredibly nutritious, and so sort of taking that mindset and to the pet shop when you're going to buy those treats or you're looking online, look for things like organ meats, like lean meats that are very nutritious for our dogs and don't have all of the other stuff added. So I'd steer clear of any wheat flours, artificial flavors, preservatives. What else are there? Like the colorings. Dogs can't see those colors. They don't care about them. One thing that I learned about the process of making kibble is that after the high heat extrusion, a lot of times it's nutrient dense because there's some synthetic supplements added in, a nutrient dense ball, but doesn't have a whole lot of flavor. And so they add on what's called a palatant to sort of make it more appealing. And in some cases, some companies will use an appalatant that sort of has the same odor of other dogs' feces. Our dogs smell each other's butt so they can identify each other. And so it makes them interested in it. And then they lick it. There's a little bit of fat and they're like, oh, okay, this is food. And so if you see any of those sprayed on or anything that's coated with anything, it's probably something that's already been processed that you probably want to steer clear of.
Okay. And so that's what you recommend for when it comes to buying treats?
Buying store-bought treats. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Is there would be like a go-to kind of like your favorite is your most nutritious or just whatever they like?
Well, of course, my favorite are real dog treats.
100%.
You can find in our monthly boxes. I think organ meats are really, really important. They're the greatest addition to a processed food diet. Oily fish. This is a little bit harder to come by, but gaining a little more popularity. So I've seen quite a few dogs suffer from skin allergies, itchy skin, yeasty paws, and even ear infections. And oftentimes that's due to an imbalance of omega-3 fatty acids. You've got your 3s and your 6s. Your 6s are inflammatory and your 3s are anti-inflammatory. Both essential. You have to have them. But when the omega-6s outweigh the 3s, you tend to see that inflammation present itself through itchy red skin and sometimes between the toes. And so what can offset that is oily fish. And there are quite a few available. In our boxes, we have capelin, smelt, anchovies, salmon, and those are really, really good for adding in omega-3s through whole foods in the diet and really helping with those the dogs that have a lot of itchy skin. So the organ meats, the seafoods, and if you're just trying to add a new variety of protein, a muscle meat that's going to not give your dog an upset stomach, but so that'll be something that's very lean. Usually anything that's air dried by nature has to be trimmed of fat, else it won't dry properly. So if you keep a lookout for that, more than likely there's nothing else added in there. Okay. The other thing that I also really urge people, even if you're feeding raw food and it's a pre-made raw, more than likely it's going to be ground. Yeah. And that ground, the food that's already grounded gives very little dental hygiene, dental cleaning benefits. So even if you're already feeding raw, great, because you don't have these extra starches that are building up on the teeth, but you still want to give your dog something to chew on. And so nowadays we've got raw meaty bones that are available at your pet store. I've seen them pretty widespread here in terms of the raw meat on the bone. But if you don't feel comfortable feeding that, you can also feed a dried chew like a duck wing or a chicken foot or something like that. That's going to be abrasive enough to scrape off some of that built up plaque or tartar.
Yeah, yeah. I know my puppy loves his. Well, he's not a puppy anymore, but he loves his raw meaty bones. And I've grown up as a kid in New Zealand. The farm dogs, that's what they always got as well. And it was like, and
Mhm.
you see them just like hovering around them. It's like, this is my bone. Get away from me. And
Yeah,
they love it. It's just like, yeah,
it's a
it's
very instinctual behavior to them and almost mesmerizing to watch them in their element. It's like they really love, the action of like putting their paw down and ripping it up. I
yeah.
tell everyone, I'm like, there's a reason why stuffed dog toys resemble whole prey. They're used to ripping that meat or intestines out from inside of the animal, and that the a stuffed animal is just a replication of that.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. What about if people want to try and make their own treats? Like what do you recommend? I guess the first thing is like the source of food that they get, and then how will they go about doing that?
Yeah, it's so much easier than you think. I have taught so many workshops on making your treats at home, and people that are doing a lot of training with their puppies just love it because it saves them so much money. So you'll need, very easy, a dehydrator, commercial dehydrator. They've got these
What
home size ones.
so what is that? Is that like you just go to your local shop and
Yeah, I mean, nowadays you could pretty much find everything online on Amazon,
yeah,
or I would say even like a local hardware store. So they're food grade dehydrators. They're typically about this. The old school TV boxes, the
yeah,
ones that are actually cubes, about the size of a TV. And you can fit several trays. There's usually 10 to 12 trays. You pull the trays out, you can put the meat on top, stick it in, set the temperature. I like to dry treats at around 140 degrees at home. We air dry them
that's
here.
Fahrenheit,
Yes,
correct? Yeah,
Fahrenheit. Yes.
yeah.
Anywhere from 12 to 24 hours. And so, that's what you need. But in terms of machinery, at home, a knife and a cutting board, and you want to source meats that are either lean or organ meats or oily fish. That's going to be your easiest type of meat to start with. The thinner you slice your meats, the less time they will take to dry, of course. And usually, what I recommend is what's a cut of boneless cut of meat that you're familiar with?
Um, I'll just be your beef steak or kangaroo.
Sure. Yeah. Oh, kangaroo's illegal in California.
What?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
It's illegal. Oh
Yeah.
man, kangaroo is so good.
I know. Dying to put it in our boxes, but we
Why
can't.
is it illegal?
I don't know.
They're like rabbits in Australia. They're just jumping around and breeding
They're
like,
not here.
yeah, right. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. But we'll say beef, right? Let's
Yeah,
say a cut of beef sirloin. And here's the
yeah.
thing, you don't have to go for the expensive cuts for our dogs. We go for the expensive cuts that are marbled because after we cook them, they're really juicy and tender. Our dogs love and need to chew. So you can go for the cuts that are kind of chewy that we wouldn't like. They generally tend to be less expensive as well. So let's say, a beef chuck, for example. If you put that bad boy in the freezer for about an hour before you're ready to slice it up, it's going to make it so much easier. Once you get into those thin slices, the meat kind of goes everywhere. The same thing with the organ meats. So if you can firm it up by putting it in the freezer for about an hour, that will cut your prep time in half. So you want to slice them into about 2 centimeters each. You don't have to go any thinner than that. Slice it all up, put it on your dehydrator drying trays, and then pop it in for about 12 hours at 140 degrees Fahrenheit. And once you check on them, they're done when they break apart easily. I'm looking over here because I think I've got probably a sample to show you. I've got beef liver right here.
Yeah.
And so if the liver breaks apart with a snap like that, you know it's done. If it's still sort of bendable, then you haven't quite removed all of the moisture that you've needed in order for it to become shelf stable.
I see it.
That was coming.
She's like, oh, is that for me?
That's icon. He was like, let me check. He's our chief tasting officer, so he's like, usually give it to me.
I'll make sure it's okay, Mum. Let me check it for you.
Exactly. But yeah, when they break apart like that, that means they're ready to go. If they're still bendable, that means they're not done. And if you take them out before they're done and try to store them, they will lose their lifespan, essentially. So they won't last very long.
Okay. And like, how much should you be feeding them of the treats a day?
Great question. So I generally recommend, especially with the organ meats, let's talk about that because that's your most nutrient dense and rich treat. So if there's going to be any digestive upset, it's usually because you've overfed organ. So I follow the palm of their paw right here, the base of their paw. That's about of their paw.
Okay. Yeah.
About how much you should start feeding a day of organ meats. You can certainly work your way up. You know, you want to go slow. You want to introduce each treat.
So this is including treats and like, so the organ meats, the treats on top of their meals, or like you're saying organ meats in general with their daily food?
On top of their meals.
On top of their meals, okay.
Yeah. For you, you know, you've got a slightly smaller dog than mine. He's 140 pounds.
That's about 60 kilos. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's that's pretty big.
So yeah, he's the size of a human. But even in his case, you know, he's fed a raw diet, which includes organ meats, but for his treats, I still add them on top of his food, and I just start with the size of his paw.
Okay. And that's per serving or per day?
Per day.
Per day.
Yeah. Oh. You start there, and then
Frankie's going to be a little bit upset with that. I need to cut that.
Yeah. No, you can certainly feed more than that, but we don't want to upset their tummy. So if they've never had this particular treat before, and it goes slow. You know, the same sort of goes for when you're opening up your refrigerator and you're adding fresh food into their kibble bowl. You want to go slow, take it easy. And if you check their poop and it's still nice and compact and solid and firm, then you go on and you try something else.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Awesome. I think that's a lot of great information for people to find out. And if people want to learn more about you, what's the best way to visit? Come find out about it. This is the Real Dog Box, realdog.com.
Yeah, you could go to real.dog. You could go to our Instagram is @realdogbox. And pretty much all of our platforms we're on a Real Dog Box. On YouTube and Instagram is where we share the most information about nutrition, coupled with our courses that we have available on Feed Real.
Okay, and so you do have courses. So, like, are you guys shipping internationally yet, or is it just in America, or like what's
the U.S. and Canada?
U.S. and Canada.
Yeah. You know, my food philosophy has really changed over the years. I don't think food should travel very far. Fresh food, not at least. And so my goal is to, if we're going to open up in different areas of the world, to have a local kitchen where we can regionally source what's native to that country. I'd love to have kangaroo in our boxes and help out with whatever other invasive species there are that got to go anyway, and repurpose them for
Yeah.
nutrition for our dogs.
Here's a question. I don't know if you guys do it. One thing that I'm starting to see pop up a bit is insect treats that like crickets and uh, and I have no this. I've got no opinion about it. I see a lot of it going down because it's like environmentally friendly, which there's a stake to say for that, and I think that's quite interesting.
Sure.
What are your thoughts about like treats that are from insects?
I think as treats generally they are high in protein.
Yeah.
And they are somewhat sustainable. So I think it really depends on what your definition of that is, because these are not just like crickets we're finding in the jungle. They have to be farmed as well.
Yeah.
And so what does that potentially lead to if our mainstay of protein is going to be cricket, right? We need it. We know that at minimum, our dogs and our cats are carnivores and they need to have meat in their diet. We could probably survive. But if that, becomes the norm, just like anything else, it's like we can very easily overdo it. So I think there has to be a much more even spread of sourcing. But I like the conversation because I think at the same time, it encourages better regulations in terms of farming practices and supporting some of our smaller ranchers and farmers that, really can't compete with the large corporations.
Well, I like here today, they were the sponsor of our raw dog food company, and I heard about them through Dr. Judy Morgan, and they have like amazing raw, and they're a small farmer that that locally source, and I think for people to like a lot of farmers are kind of like going out of business because everyone's and like everything's getting expensive. So I get the kind of the consumer, what we're doing from the consumer point, but those are really good to do to support your local farmers and where they're getting and looking for companies that are also supporting their local farmers. So I think that's a great idea.
I think the challenge with that specifically in the raw dog food industry is that for now it will be cost prohibitive for the masses to feed food that comes from a local farmer. And so you kind of have to weigh, the pros and cons there, because part of the reason why we have gotten to where we are and been so successful is because we've managed to keep our boxes affordable.
Yeah.
So the affordability, convenience, and accessibility to different proteins. Does that mean that we can always source grass-fed, grass-finished, pasture-raised? We can't, because once we, and that's sort of a different problem to solve, if you will. But once we start going down that line, then we become more of a luxury that a lot of people won't be able to afford. And so you've just got to find a balance, which is, am I going to eat fresh food? Am I going to eat fresh food that only comes from a local farmer? Like, where do I stand on that? And I think each person sort of has to make their own decision based on their values.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. And we just had a question pop up, which I think would be great to have your input for. Anita just said that she loves, and I've had a friend ask me the same question as well. I just popped this up here. She'd love to support her local farmers. However, she has two large dogs and can't afford to do so. What do you recommend? And I totally get that. So many people are in this situation, and even if you can afford it, like people living in New York City, like there's not a lot of farmers like to try and get out of that. So, what do you recommend for especially let's talk about the large, because you've got a large dog. It's easy for me to tell people when I got like a little French bulldog, but like for the people with the and two large dogs as well, for the people with large animals, like what do you recommend that they do?
I think where you can be mutually supportive of each other is with the offal, the organ meats that a lot of times smaller farmers have difficulty selling to the masses. So if they've got other parts of the animal that they can offload to human grade farmers markets or stores, you can be helpful by using some of the organ meats that they have. It will be a higher priced organ meat than you will get from your local grocery store, but you'll be supporting that local farmer, and you'll also be feeding one of the essential parts of the animal for our dogs, right? Like that's if I one thing over the last few years that has changed, in my opinion, people ask all the time, does it have to be grass fed? Does it have to be, all organic? I used to say, just feed your dog whatever you're able to feed yourself, like follow your own food principles. Now that I've learned more about nutrition and I understand how poorly raised in terms of nutrients factory farmed animals can be, I have said, if nothing else, source grass fed, grass finished, and organic organs, because that's where they're getting all of their vital vitamins and minerals. And so if you can, for your dogs, feed that's going to put them 10 steps ahead. And that will also, in my opinion, help the smaller farmer who's going to be having trouble selling that mainstream to other human grocery stores.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And I guess like as if you're at least getting the organ meats, which is where you're getting some of the essential vitamins from, and then everything else is like whatever you can afford. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Ruby, for your time today. And again, I'm just going to put Real Dog Box up in the chat here, so for people can see and go find out about you. You guys have a subscription service, your YouTube channel, like you mentioned. There's lots of information there for people to continue to learn more. And if you want to do courses, you want to learn how to do it yourself, Ruby actually does teaches courses. So for those of you that want to know, learn more, go to Real Dog Box. And while I'm at it, because we do actually have a summit, and it comes on to, which I totally forgot about. We've got so much going on. For those of you, which was quite interesting, one of the things that we had on our raw course that we did last year, we actually had a couple of dog trainers come take this course, because what they were doing for training was like, and which totally makes sense. The same with ourselves, is like if our moods change, it's because of our diet, like what you said. Mm-hmm. So we have the Out of Control Dog Summit going on right now, and relating to feeding and your diet, and there is a big part of that component to that. So for those of you who are looking for that, go check that out. Thank you so much, Ruby. We really appreciate your time, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. See you guys.